Coming up on Primetime Lawmakers, inspired by the shocking disappearance and death of Caylee Anthony, legislation is introduced making it a felony to fail to report a missing child. Republicans and Democrats work behind the scenes to bring a passable charter schools bill back to the House floor, even as a new charter schools bill is introduced in the Senate. A bill making a second DUI conviction with a child in the car a felony gets a hearing in Senate committee. And a topic many will find shocking. Human trafficking is a growing problem in Georgia. We'll be talking about pending legislation with Senator Charlie Bethel of Dalton, and U.S. Attorney Sally Yates will talk about prosecuting human trafficking cases. No one will want to miss this revealing discussion. From Wednesday, February 15th, 2012, the 19th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly, this is Primetime Lawmakers. Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Let's go live to the Capitol where Sandra Parrish reports a headline-grabbing case out of Florida is the subject of a new bill filed in the Georgia House. Sandra.
Scott, few people haven't heard of the Caylee Anthony case, the little Florida girl who went missing and was ultimately found dead in 2008. Now, Representative B.J. Pack wants a law to protect children here in Georgia and require parents report their disappearance within a timely manner.
Ms. Anthony did not report the disappearance of her minor child for at least 30 days. And number two, as the trial went on, the story about the whereabouts of her daughter continuously changed.
Caylee Anthony, accused in the murder of her 2-year-old daughter Caylee, was acquitted of the child's death last year. Representative B.J. Pack and other co-signers say the bill was prompted by outrage over Caylee's death.
I had a tremendous amount of input from my constituents after the tragedy we had with Caylee.
Subsequent to that verdict, I was outraged. I felt like there was a miscarriage of justice that occurred for the young victim. At the same time, a lot of our constituents and those citizens in Georgia felt the same way.
The bill would require the disappearance of a child be reported by the parent or guardian within 18 hours.
The 18-hour period was brought about after consultation with law enforcement. Every year, approximately, there's 800,000 children missing that get reported missing. At the same time, what the law enforcement are telling me is that an early reporting of that is critical in trying to locate the child. In addition, in terms of evidence collection, obviously evidence, the longer it stays out in the field, subject to the elements, it goes away.
It's unfortunate when we have a situation like this come out in a neighboring state, but this is going to help children and the parents and grandparents of every child in Georgia.
Parents who simply make a mistake would not be charged.
If someone is a good parent, you're not going to have issues with that person knowing where a minor child is. But it's in those instances where a parent is criminally negligent or intentionally do not care about the well-being of the child that could harmful things could happen, which apparently is what happened in the Florida case.
The bill would also make it a felony if the death of a child was not reported within 12 hours. So far, 14 other states have similar laws, and a dozen others are considering legislation. Negotiations continue between the Republican leadership in the House and the Democratic caucus over charter schools. Majority Whip Ed Lindsey told me today last week's failed vote on the constitutional amendment that would have allowed the state to approve charter schools was only a test vote. Lindsey says he's confident they will come up with more than enough votes needed to pass it.
We are talking to a lot of good people on both sides of the political aisle to see whether or not we can come up with the other 10 votes, and when we do, we will bring it back to the floor. I'm hoping that through our discussions we'll be able to get not only 120 but much more than that.
Meantime, Democrats led by Minority Leader Stacey Abrams are pushing their own plan.
We will spell out what a charter school is and what it is not. We will also spell out that the state has responsibility and the accountability for the process. And we believe if those two things can be met, then this is a bill that can move forward and we believe can support both the intent of charter school advocates, but also the advocates of traditional public schools.
Democrats held their own public hearing on both measures today.
I find it very hard for anyone, any person who would want to usurp the authority of a local elected governing body, being school boards.
I think we have the greatest local control you can buy because our parents are taxpayers of Fulton County. If the money comes to our school, it is coming from taxpayers into a Fulton County public school. We have to accept everybody that comes. It is a public school. And guess what? If they don't like what we do, they don't have to go to the board and vote and sit in a meeting and listen to people talk and keep it moving. They will leave and walk right back to their traditional local school, and we will cease to exist.
We have a $60 million plus deficit in the Cobb County school systems. That's going to lead to layoffs. We're cutting almost 350 teacher positions. We're increasing class sizes. All of these things are because of money. And we believe that 1162 will further decrease the amount of money that Cobb has to spend.
I do not support the idea that this is taxation without representation. I think my feet are the best representation of my taxes.
Both Abrams and Lindsay say they are still willing to work on the issue.
There are ongoing conversations. I don't think any decisions have been made yet, but we continue to look forward to working with the other side.
We're going to take a look at all possibilities and the things that we philosophically can agree on. We're going to do what's necessary to get it passed.
The House Education Committee meets tomorrow, and we're told that the enabling legislation that could spell out how charter schools would be funded may be added to the agenda. The House approved a bill today to reaffirm a state law that the Georgia Composite Medical Board and the Georgia Board of Dentistry have the sole responsibility to license doctors and dentists.
This is an economic issue, as this bill ensures that physicians and dentists will know that while we have a shortage of doctors in Georgia, we as a state want to encourage new doctors and dentists to come and open their practice here.
Does not this bill make it more receptive to physicians to practice in the state of Georgia?
Yes, and thank you for the question from my learned colleague in the medical profession. You should know better than anyone in this House the need for an increased policy that would make sure that physicians have access to want to come here and that their licensure remain a function of their skill and their competence and not whether they participate in a particular third-party reimbursement program. So thank you for the question.
The bill passed 167-1 and now goes to the Senate. Scott?
Thanks very much, Sandra. Moving on to some committee action. The state imposes harsh penalties for those convicted for driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and those penalties may get tougher. The Senate Special Judiciary Committee heard testimony on a bill that would impose the penalty of a felony on those convicted for a second time of a DUI with a child in the car. The measure also allows a felony charge against those convicted of a DUI who were involved in a car accident resulting in the death of a child. The committee gave the DUI bill a do-pass recommendation, and it now moves on to Senate rules. Today, legislators got an update of the state's water challenges. Members of the Coastal Council and Georgia Environmental Protection Division presented the Regional Water Plan. The bill is designed to improve Georgia's water systems by focusing on three main areas: salt water intrusion into coastal drinking water, water quality, and the state of municipal systems. It outlines management of the state's water through the year 2050, but the council says the plan won't be fully realized without more money from the state. Legislators will address the financial needs of the Water Council and all state agencies as they comb through the fiscal year 2013 budget. We go back to the Capitol now, where our Keosha Howard is standing by with an update on what the Senate did to touch the charter schools issue today. Good evening, Keosha.
Good evening, Scott. The charter schools debate did continue today in the Senate. The question of local control is at the heart of the issue, with opponents saying the charter schools amendment will limit the control of local school boards. Senator Vincent Fort took a point of personal privilege to speak out against the measure.
I would submit if you take away a local school system's ability to allocate its own money in the way that it sees fit, you are not talking about public schools anymore. What you are talking about is a path toward voucher schools. I would submit to you that if House Bill 1162 passes this legislature and is signed by the governor, then we are creating, in effect, private schools. But I would hope that we, as legislators, would put our actions where our mouths are when it comes to our belief in local control. If we really believe in local control, we cannot abandon it.
The House version of the charter schools amendment is still hanging in the balance. It failed in the House last week, but will be up for a vote again. Senator Fran Miller says he plans to introduce an identical Senate version soon. A victory today for state school employees. The Senate passed a bill that would increase the monthly contribution from $4 to $10 for certain employees. Sponsor Senator Jack Hill says the monthly increase will mean a bigger payoff for employees in the end.
It adds about approximately $100,000 a year to the retirement plan. The Public School Employees Fund group actually includes mostly school bus drivers, food service personnel, and some maintenance and other school employees who are not covered by the teachers' retirement system. It's a bill that helps a fairly low wage employees, but yet they're very important in our school system. It's a low payout and it has, I think, all the safeguards that we need for a good retirement system.
Passing unanimously, that measure now moves to the House. The Senate passed a second measure that says future tax commissioners and their staff will not be eligible for the state retirement plan. Scott, the bill's sponsor, Senator Bill Heath, says this move is necessary because they are not employees of the state.
Thanks, Kiosha. Today, lawmakers discuss legislation meant to promote one of the state's golden crops, the Vidalia Onion. Members of the Senate Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee submitted a do-pass recommendation for a bill that will eliminate royalty and license fee limits for the Vidalia Onion trademark. Supporters of the bill argue that simplifying regulations for the use of the Vidalia Onion will encourage more food manufacturers to use it in their products and boost the royalties collected. Those royalties go towards promoting the famous sweet onion and protecting its trademark. Having already passed the House, the bill now moves to the Senate Rules Committee. Coming up after the break, an important discussion you don't want to miss. Human trafficking in Georgia is shocking and some say shameful. We'll take a look at pending legislation to address this terrible scourge with Senator Caylee Bethel. And U.S. Attorney Sally Yates prosecutes these kinds of cases. Stay with us. There's much more to come. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Sex trafficking, child prostitution, human trafficking are growing problems in Georgia, and many of the victims are minors. Legislative measures have been introduced in previous sessions with the goal of helping protect victims, but are run afoul of critics who say affording greater protection to child prostitutes amounts to decriminalization. This year, legislation has been introduced to expand the list of those compelled to report sex offenses against minors, including film and photo processors and reproductive health care facilities. Joining me now on set to talk about the larger issue of human trafficking is Senator Caylee Bethel of Dalton. He's one of the sponsors of that legislation. And Sally Yates. Ms. Yates is the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. She's prosecuted numerous human trafficking offenders. Thank you both for being here to talk about this important issue, and you might even say an embarrassing issue, because it's one we've been dealing with for quite a while. And Senator, I'm going to get to you on some of the things the state might do to stem the tide, but let's kind of start at the end of the story, Ms. Yates, with some of the prosecutions that you've had to undertake. How big is the problem in Georgia, and how does human trafficking surface in the Peach State?
Well, the problem is very big in Georgia. There are various accounts. Some say that we're #1 in the country. Some say we're #6. But, it's really hard to be able to quantify just how big the problem is. What we know is whatever it is, it's too much. And it also may be that we're really doing more here in this city to prosecute and to uncover human trafficking than they are in a lot of other urban areas. So while Georgia may be at the very top, it may be that we're just uncovering more of it.
Let's deal with child prostitution for just a second. We're talking about hundreds of victims a year here?
Well, some estimates have said as many as 300 victims in the state a year, and most of those are here in the Atlanta area.
Why Atlanta?
Well, there are a variety of reasons. Some of the same things that make us a center for business also make us a center for human trafficking. We have the airport, where it's easy for people to come in and out quickly. We are known somewhat for our sex industry here, both strip clubs and prostitution here. We have a large convention business. We have lots of big sporting events, so we have a ready-made market here as well.
Senator, the state has undertaken a few things to nibble away at the edges of this and to make prosecutions more viable. Where do you think we ought to be going with this now?
Well, as you mentioned, Scott, we do have a bill that Senator Renee Unterman is the primary sponsor of in the Senate, as well as Senate Bill 316, which I've authored. My bill addresses what we do when we find those who are committing these crimes, and that is to extend the statute of limitations for prosecutions for crimes against minors, such that the victim's attaining majority, becoming 18 years, would be what triggers the statute of limitations running. Currently in Georgia, there's sort of a mixed bag of how we handle these sorts of offenses. What we need to know is that a lot of times these minor victims are in a situation where it's very difficult for them to come forward, even more difficult than adult victims are. And so we're looking for ways to try and make sure we are identifying the individuals. That's what Renee Unterman's bill does, which is the mandatory reporting that you talked about. we're very proud that we're moving up the ladder. As the attorney said, the United States Attorney said, we have a problem in Georgia. This is a global problem. Upwards of 1 million people are trafficked across international boundaries every year, according to some estimates, U.S. State Department estimates. And when you look at what's going on, we have to recognize that these are individuals in our midst. And I think really bigger than any law that we can pass in Georgia, it is for Georgians to recognize that these are girls and boys that live in and among us that we need to protect. And if we start recognizing that as individual citizens, we're going to improve. Once we catch these individuals, then the U.S. Attorney's Office, the local prosecutors do a great job of pursuing them, and we're giving them more tools every day. One of the watchdog groups in this area had us as a state sadly ranked it at F just a few short years ago. We passed Senate Bill 200 last year, which greatly enhanced our ability to pursue this, and now we're at a C. And you think, well, we've got room to improve, and we do. We're one of only 10 states who are at a C or better.
Decriminalizing the crime so the victims aren't treated as criminals. I realize there's an age problem there. 16 is the age of consent in Georgia. How do you address that?
Well, I think that for those that really want to study the issue, you are correct that 16 is what we consider the age of consent for sexual conduct in Georgia. Well, there's no way you can consent. If you can't legally consent, there's no way you can commit a crime relative to selling yourself. So when you start thinking intellectually about really what are we talking about, these are young girls and young boys both that are forced into a life. I mean, this is not a choice they're making. This is not a career choice or a profession that they're choosing. They're compelled to. They're not the ones that are causing problems in our society. It's the pimps, it's the traffickers themselves, and those are who we're after. We stop that problem, and we're not going to have to worry about these boys and girls.
And the bigger issue of human trafficking yourself, it goes beyond child prostitution, doesn't it, Ms. Yates?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, in Atlanta, we have really all forms of human trafficking. Certainly, children is the most egregious form, but women every day are coerced into trafficking. Young women in their 20s and sometimes 30s. There's also a forced labor problem here in our state, where individuals are brought oftentimes from other countries and then are forced to work without any pay and kept in really horrific circumstances.
Are you having any luck at all with and your other federal agencies in getting victims and witnesses to come forward without fear of penalty?
We are. We're having better luck at having them come forward, and one of the things that we've done is really partner with non-governmental organizations, some of these outreach support groups, to be with us when we are there and when we first interview some of these young women, because they are understandably terrified. They're in a system where the law has never worked for them before, and they're afraid to tell us the truth. And so we found that it's really critical that we have a support mechanism in place for them there when we're talking with them the first time.
Is it fair to say we're starting to make some progress now on this?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot more to do, but I've been really proud of what this city has done in coming together with the business community, the charitable community, the faith-based community, and law enforcement, all in coming together to try to combat this really horrific problem.
All right. Thank you very much for both of you being here, working on this problem that really is a scourge. And slowly but surely we'll get there. Thanks for your service and your efforts. We'll be checking back with you on this, okay?
Thanks for having us.
All right, it's a pleasure. It sure is. We've got to take a short break of Primetime Lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. Much more to come. For analysis of all the Capitol news, I'll be joined by Walter Jones of the Morris News Service and the Georgia Report's Tom Crawford, two of the best from our stable of legislative journalists. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Tonight we've been talking about human trafficking and child welfare. We're going to break this down a little bit further in our reporter roundtable, among other major stories. I'm joined in studio tonight by Tom Crawford, editor of the Georgia Report, and Walter Jones, bureau chief for Morris News Service. Thank you both so much for being here with us tonight. It's been a long day for both of you. You heard some of the comments made on moving forward against human trafficking here in Georgia. And when people hear about this story, they're almost mystified that it's allowed to go on.
Well, it's interesting, the dynamic this year as opposed to leading up to legislation that finally passed last year, because that was so long and drawn out because there was controversy about whether or not it was legalizing prostitution. This year, it went through the House with only one dissenting vote. The idea that you know, it's hard to defend.
It is. And with any luck, there'll be some more action on this as we go along.
I think so, and they've got a study committee now set up to look at some of both the sociological and the criminal factors behind it as well. So, as Walter mentioned, this is an issue where you've seen the thinking really change and the resolve harden that we need to do something about it.
And Sally Yates was telling me off camera just a moment ago, businesses like Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Delta Airlines are getting involved to identify victims.
Right.
Because they might come in contact with them. A lot of other issues under the Gold Dome, of course. Is it hard to believe that tomorrow is the halfway point, day number 20? Where are we at here?
It got here very quickly, and that means in 10 more days we'll be at day 30, which is make or break time for bills. So they are holding to this schedule or this intention of getting out of here as quickly as they can by the end of March.
And crossover day for the uninitiated means that it has to pass one house, one
right.
chamber?
It has to pass the chamber in which it was introduced by day 30 or it's dead for the session. So a House bill has to get out of the House, a Senate bill has to get out of the Senate. And day 30 is really an important day. It's almost here. Hard to believe.
And charter schools seems to be coming up over and over again, Walter. What do you make of this vote last week being called a test vote now? Is that to smoke out people who needed to be maybe coerced, influenced, or talked to?
Well, obviously it was. And whether or not it was intended to be a test vote, it certainly became a test vote. Because just in the days right after the vote, the advocacy groups were sending out the emails that had the list of the no voters and said, these are the people you need to contact, these are what you need to say to them. And so it's clear they've been getting that kind of pressure.
Are you hearing that both sides of the aisle, Tom, are trying to find a pathway to make this work, the state charter amendment?
Well, there is a certain faction that's going to oppose it no matter what. It's really a matter of getting those 10 votes switched over in the House to approve it because they're almost there. And that's going to be really one of the more suspenseful items of this next 10 days is, are they going to get those 10 votes or not?
And then, of course, it has to go through the Senate, and they've got their own measure that's
right. And they got that same 2/3 vote requirement in the Senate, so it'll be a challenge there as well.
And Senator Foor taking the well, saying this raises the specter of vouchers and school choice.
Right, vouchers, school choices, we've noted before, all sorts of very emotional issues at stake, so that will not be an easy one to resolve.
The Port of Savannah in the president's budget proposal, you know, $2.8 million. That's a lot better than the $600,000 they tried to put aside for it last year. Are we going anywhere with what everyone recognizes will be a huge job engine for Georgia, Walter?
Well, the people in Savannah certainly hope so. That at least getting a little bit of extra money, 2.8, shows some momentum. It's not zero. It shows some possibility. The director of the Port Authority was saying last week that with the money that the state has already committed, about $180 million, that is enough to get the program started until the federal money comes on board. Of course, they still have to get the official go-ahead from the Corps of Engineers, which they're hoping that'll come this summer.
And the $2.8 million is a fraction of what they will need for the federal government, right?
Oh, it'll cost $600 million is
so
the
people understand
estimate
that
right now, and sometimes government projects go higher.
Speaking of money, Tom, here we are still dealing with the budget and what some people might say are scary revenue figures that are coming out for January.
Correct, Scott. Just before I came over here, the revenue collection numbers were released for the month of January, and they were pretty flat. I think 0.7% higher than January of a year ago. So that's getting dangerously close to the point where you may have to dip into the reserve funds to balance the budget for the rest of this fiscal year. And that does have a lot of people concerned, and I think for good reason. So that's something to keep a close eye on as we move forward.
And some hot button issues yet to come. We're going to hear something about vicious dogs, maybe even tying drug tests to state benefits, Walter?
What I think dogs always get people, they're emotional about them, whether it's a pet or whether you're afraid of them. And so that is getting a hearing in the committee stage. The issue about the drug test for applicants for welfare programs, TANF, got a hearing today, and there was a long line of people signed up opposed to it. Social service advocacies saying that we think that it'll make it harder for people to apply for their benefits.
And that Fourth Amendment thing may very well come to play in here, Tom, before that's all done.
Right, because a similar law was passed in Florida, and the judge tossed it out there on Fourth Amendment grounds that it's an unreasonable search and seizure. So That's an interesting issue, and the governor today indicated that he even might be able to get behind it as well.
Really, governor?
You're right. I think Jim Galloway chased him down at an event and was talking about, I think, drug tests for people applying for unemployment benefits, and he said, might be able to get behind that. So this may have more legs right now than we thought at first.
All right, well, tomorrow being day number 20, perhaps the pace will pick up. We'll be checking back with both of you, okay?
Great.
Thank you both for joining us this evening. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, tough budget times bring tough budget cuts. Tomorrow will feature a discussion on the elimination of bariatric weight loss surgery coverage from the state health benefit plan. It'll mean thousands of dollars in out-of-pocket medical expenses for employees of the state considering weight loss surgery. Plus all the latest news from under the Gold Dome tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers, immediately following the PBS NewsHour at 6:56. If you missed any part of this broadcast, you can catch Primetime Lawmakers when it repeats at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Coming up next on GPB, Georgia Traveler. Join David, Michelle, and Ricky as they explore the fabulous Fox Theater in Atlanta, get a taste of Chateau Elan in Brazelton, and discover the U.S. National Tick Collection in Statesboro. Yes, there is one. And if you're itching for a Georgia road trip, Georgia Traveler is your ticket right here on GPB coming up next. And that's our broadcast for this 19th legislative day of the 2012 session. I'm Scott Slade. Join us tomorrow night at 6:56 for Primetime Lawmakers. Hope you have a good night.
This is a GPB original production.